Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the witnesses for being with us today and for your important testimony. As has been repeatedly noted today, Americans are bearing the significant burden of the tax gap. This committee has a responsibility to ensure the public has confidence that our tax code is being administered fairly. That goes to the core of what this hearing is about. Our constituents are expected to pay their taxes in full and on time. But with the declining in IRS funding and a 40% decrease in enforcement staffing levels, it's no surprise some powerful interests and greedy individuals are trying to dodge their obligations. One area of concern for me is the cost to the American taxpayers from supposed charitable and social welfare organizations that get special tax preferences and then abuse those preferences for personal gain or self-dealing. I'm also concerned that such egregious behaviors are not being adequately pursued by the IRS. Inspector General George, if I can, what I'd like to do is just raise a few scenarios that could represent improper behavior by a tax-exempt organization and get just a yes or no answer if you think the activity is troublesome or would warrant further investigation. The first one, let's suppose a board member of a nonprofit organization owns a company that sells millions of dollars in products and services back to that same nonprofit organization and at inflated prices. Do you find this troubling? Yes or no?
It's concerning.
How about a senior executive and a top fundraiser for a nonprofit organization has a stake in a media company that the nonprofit directs millions of dollars in business to? Should this activity raise any flags?
It would raise questions, sir.
What if the newly selected president of the board of directors of a nonprofit organization subsequently received a contract worth more than $1 million from the nonprofit's largest vendor within days of assuming his new position? Would this create a likely conflict of interest?
It depends on the circumstances. That potentiality exists.
Something that you would look at.
Yes.
Last scenario, let's say the CEO of a nonprofit charged hundreds of thousands of dollars of lavish travel expenses to the nonprofit's largest vendor without adequate documentation. Would that be something that the IRS should look into?
Definitely.
Okay. So thank you, Inspector General. But I'll ask again. We laid out 4 scenarios just presented. If they were actual cases, would these warrant further investigation of possible abuse of the nonprofit tax-exempt organization?
Yes.
Thank you. I agree. But as you might have surmised, these scenarios are not hypothetical. There are allegations of self-dealing within the NRA, a 501c4 organization with 5 million members. It's incredibly disturbing to see these allegations and to think that NRA executives are possibly misappropriating their donors' contributions and abusing their nonprofit status for personal gain. And the American taxpayer is subsidizing the bill. This morning, I sent a letter to the IRS commissioner, and I sent a copy to you, requesting an investigation into these allegations and whether they warrant reconsideration of the NRA's tax-exempt status. I would appreciate your attention to this matter. More broadly, in 2018, your office published a report on the process for investigating referrals of impermissible activity by tax-exempt organizations. Given the follow-up since your report and your interactions with IRS management, do you believe there are adequate policies and procedures currently in place to enable the IRS to examine improper conduct by tax-exempt organizations, and whether the IRS has sufficient information and resources to uncover abuse?
They instituted extensive revisions to their existing policies, and the most recent review of it shows that they are following those new policies, and we will have eventually we'll follow up again to ensure that mistakes aren't being made. But as of now, they are taking the steps that they committed to us that they would take.
Okay, but one of the concerns in the report was that referrals of potential abuse of nonprofit organizations hadn't been followed up. Have those been subsequently followed up upon?
We did. Most of them, I believe, have been provided. There were some that weren't, but a lot were.
Okay. And then as we look forward, what more can be done to address the tax-exempt sector to ensure honest, hardworking Americans aren't paying the price for the tax cheats and organizations that get subsidized on special tax preferences and then violate our tax code?
You know, again, and this may not necessarily be a direct response to your question, Congressman, but there's an important issue that's really hasn't been addressed at all, Mr. Chairman, Congressman. The underground economy and the impact that it has on the tax gap is just unknown, but just use your imagination as to what that is. So, I mean, obviously, underground economy, we're suggesting illegal activity, but not necessarily illegal activity, but activity that is completely done in cash, again, using whether it's a Bitcoin exchange or whether it's some other, or just cash. That is not even being considered in this overall discussion.
Great, thank you. And with permission, I'd like to submit for the record the articles from the New Yorker, April 17th and May 7th.
So ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank the gentleman. With that, let me recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Swazi, to inquire.